Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Ying Lui, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today, and I'm super excited about our time together. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way through to today, and then I want to talk about Blue Lake Packaging and what makes it so unique and so attractive to people who care about the environment. Okay?
Thank you. Yeah, it has been such an honor to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you. So tell us where you were born.
I was born in Beijing, China.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was like a very bustling metropolitan city, as people can imagine. It has probably 25 million people. I lost counting already.
That's a lot. Did you grow up there?
Yeah, I grew up there. I finished college in Beijing. I have all my family, like extended families are in Beijing. My friends from schools are still in, mostly in China, in Beijing. And I frequently go back, to visit my families. And so I still have a deep root in.
That's awesome. What was your favorite thing about growing up in Beijing?
Favorite things. Wow, there's so many, as you can imagine. There's just the food, the alleys. There are a lot of history in Beijing. There are like Forbidden City, there's Summer Palace, there are Great Walls, there's all kinds of museums. And of course, as I said, my childhood friendships are still there. And needless to say, my families, my extended families, those make me feel like I need to go back to visit them. We have a very close tie. When I was little, well, as you know, like last weekend was a Chinese New Year.
Yeah.
So that's really reminded me, every Chinese New Year when I was little, we went to my grandma's house, on my father's side, and then my grandpa's house on my mother's side. We have a big family gathering, and then there's definitely little red envelopes. So that was the time, like make some money.
That's
And
awesome.
so those are all my fond memories of Beijing.
So who was the most influential person to you growing up?
Wow. I think what's interesting was, I think when I was little, I always liked to listen to, the conversations with adults, so they always talk about their work, and they talk about politics, and they talk about, things that they heard from other people, from neighbors. So I was always like, just sit there and listening to, what they talk about. I definitely felt like my family, like my parents, have been make a big impact on kind of shape my values, like, how to treat others, help people, be part of a community. And also, I think what's important when I look back, thinking about, being a parent myself now, I'm a mother of two daughters, 12 and 9. What I felt like I learned from my parents was give them the freedom to do what they wanted to do, and not just give them the answer, give them the questions, but not the answers.
Right.
So I have many examples. Like, for instance, I remember in high school, I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to go to college and study journalism. And then, so I actually joined a TV station, being a TV host. At one point, I wanted to really try it out and see what it's like. And also, I happened to have an aunt who works for China Daily. One is English, or the leading English newspaper in China. She was a chief editor for the weekend edition. So I followed her during the weekend, just go to some gala nights and some fashion shows, just to experience what it's like being a reporter. And to be honest with you, at the end of the day, well, my parents actually supported all of this. And what I still remember, what's interesting was my dad at one point bought 5 books, from like a book fair. Was all about, like a journalism and journalists, and then, their life stories. So I think they really opened the door to me to really try something before I make up my mind.
Gotcha.
The interesting part was, after reading those books, after following my, aunt, all over the places, and I decided not to be a journalist because what I see was, I think even now, like I've been to different industries and doing different things throughout my life, but what I learned was, there are always the pros and cons of every job.
Oh,
You
sure.
cannot find the perfect job and say, hey, you make tons of money, at the same time you're happy every day. There's no challenges, there are no conflicts, there's no downside of it, anything. So I learned, everything has, a downside, and then the the truth is, or the reality is, whether or not you still enjoy the positive side of something, but that you can basically bear with, the downside of something. So
Gotcha.
that's kind of, when you talk about who influenced me the most, I think definitely my parents. And then later on, when I joined Apple, I had a great boss, who is a senior executive at Apple, and has influenced me in many different ways in terms of leadership. So I just felt like being so fortunate, being surrounded with people who have very kind of positive, attitude, and also give me a lot of times a platform or freedom to try what I wanted to try. When I fail, they will help me and support me, and not just to blame me.
Right. I gotcha. So in high school, what was your favorite subject?
Um, Interesting. I think what I did fairly well was English. I wouldn't say that was my favorite subject, but I did it fairly well. I listened to Voice of America, VOA, when I was in China. I read China Daily, of course, and then some other newspaper, like English newspapers, giving the access I have to my aunt, and all this. And also I have, friends from America. By the way, what's interesting was, I wanted originally, as I said, I want to be a journalist, and I wanted to be an English reporter or something. And so English was I can say probably English was my favorite subject at the time.
I gotcha. Okay. So when you go to college, so after high school, you go to college.
Mhm.
What did you major in college?
I majored in is called industrial engineering and
Okay.
foreign trade. So what it was about at the time, actually in the early 90s, China just started opening the door, to the foreign countries, and they have a lot of like partnerships with different companies. So this major was actually created in that kind of economy,
Okay.
just helping people to learn some engineering kind of concept, but at the same time doing business with, companies that focus on technology. Because
Right.
as you can imagine, I think in the US is business administration. But one thing I really learned before I go to college, while I was still in high school, was in order to learn business, you really need to learn something, because the business itself is transactions,
Right.
it's like how you build relationships. There's definitely some common skills you can learn,
Right.
or outside of school.
Right.
On the other side, in order to say, hey, you want to sell computers, or you want to sell, semiconductor chips, you want to sell something, or you want to do business, with this kind of, or even agriculture equipment, you really need to learn, how it works, the technical side of something before you can even do the trading.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of my philosophy right now. Even, nowadays, when I talk to my girls, I always want them to get into sort of engineering, at least learn some engineering concept before they, think about, something else.
Right. How to build it, basically.
Yeah, exactly. How you need to learn how to build it, what it takes to build it, and the cost structure before you really try to do some business. Yeah.
So did you have a favorite subject in college?
Um, Interesting. Probably I could not say I have a favorite subject. What I really happy about my college education was it really give me a wide spread of
Mm,
subjects that I can choose from, because it's, in today's term, it's a kind of interdisciplinary. It's
right.
just like some schools, you don't really have a major or a focus. You can
Yeah.
choose and pick all different kinds of subjects, and then you create almost like a major yourself.
Mhm.
It's a little bit like that. So I learned, a lot of subjects in engineering, and some even in English at the time, and then a lot of subjects in business, like negotiation, contract, supply chain, and things like that. Yeah, so I can now say, there's one thing I really, really like, but if you ask me, you push me on that one, I feel like a mechanical drawing was one of my favorite, because I really like to, there's so many different components in it. When
Right.
you have, a very complex component and you need to draw a 2D drawing, on that. At that time, there was no CAD, there are no CAD, stations. Like we
Right.
all just have a 2B pencil and then a long ruler.
Right.
So that was kind of what we did, and a lot of logic, a lot of sort of imaginations, like what's behind that. When you use dotted line, when you use solid line, if people understand what I'm talking about. But
Yeah.
nowadays people don't do that anymore. They
It was
all
a
have
different world, right?
patience. Yeah.
Different world. I sat down with my son a few years ago, 3 years ago or something, mechanical engineering major, right?
Mhm.
And also biomed minor.
Oh.
And I'm sitting with him and he's like, Dad, watch. And he literally built this part
Mm-hmm.
on a computer and it took 4 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes. I mean, it was crazy. And the whole thing was literally built. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and you just kind of, it's like, this is crazy. How long
Yeah.
would that have taken with a pencil and a ruler and a piece of paper, like you're talking about? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a completely different world now. So
Yeah.
it was fascinating to watch him do that
Mm-hmm.
because, he had done in his 4.5 years in school, he had done that many, many times, right? For him, it was just rote. He could have done it with his eyes closed. And
Mm-hmm.
it was fascinating for me to, to see what he had learned and also to see how much technology is advanced.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was doing this from a PC. He wasn't using some supercomputer or something. He was literally using a PC in the lab. So it was fascinating. So
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
graduate from college
College.
in Beijing. Then
Mm-hmm.
where do you go?
Yeah, then my life started to kind of become more interesting. So I wanted to go to the US, because at the time, two of my aunts, like my father has 5 siblings, and two out of them were in the US.
Yeah.
And I've been, reading so much, as I said, in English about US, and I was so fascinated about going to a different country to explore a complete, probably different life. So I took a GMAT, I took a TOEFL. Those are the English tests, like for foreign language learners,
Mhm.
and then I actually joined a program. It's a study abroad program in China,
Mhm.
offered to some liberal arts college students as part of their summer kind of program.
Right.
So because I need to make some money, and well, I was preparing for my kind of exams to the U.S. to hopefully get into a graduate school, so I taught Chinese there for the summer. And luckily, at the end of the program, I was offered an opportunity to come to Hamilton College in upstate
Okay.
New York.
Okay.
So I became a Chinese teacher for a year. Actually, I was a teaching fellow at Hamilton College.
Wow.
Yeah, how I came
So
to New
right
York.
out of college, right out of school.
Yeah, that was right out of college. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And
that
you did
was
that for a year?
yeah, for a year. So I was a teaching kind of fellow at Hamilton College
Okay.
in I don't know, you're familiar with upstate New York,
Yeah.
Clinton, New York. It's somewhere between Syracuse and Albany.
Right. So what was your favorite thing about teaching?
Um, that's also very interesting. I felt like, at the age of 23 at the time, I became a teacher before I became a student
Mhm.
again.
Right.
Um, but what I like was I really loved the interactions with the
Mhm.
students. Because they're so very sincere and they're very supportive. So I felt like I wasn't really their teacher, I was more like their friend, their kind of a teaching partner, and
Mhm.
also I think they are very interested at the time, like in the culture stuff. So we chat a lot, and I learned a lot from them as well, because we're probably only 3 or 4 years apart at the
Right.
most. And so yeah, I think that those are all very good experience to me. I never thought about being a Chinese teacher myself. I thought
Yeah.
about being a teacher at one point when I
Yeah.
was young, but I felt like that was my dream come true, being a teacher and teaching something I feel very comfortable with.
Right. So you teach for a year at Hamilton. Then
Mhm.
where do you go?
Then I because I came to US, I have the dream of going to a graduate school.
Mhm.
But at the time, I don't have that. I didn't have that much money. I cannot afford, without a scholarship. So I started looking for business schools that offer scholarships.
Right.
I applied for 3 schools, and Michigan State provided me a scholarship and
Mhm.
also give me an offer, for an MBA program. So after teaching, I went to East Lansing, Michigan,
Okay.
become a Spartan.
Yeah, I love it. So
Yeah.
you go to Michigan State, you get
Mhm.
your MBA,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Once you finish that, where do you go?
That was the beginning of my Apple story then.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
So
went so you got your MBA and went to work for Apple?
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Upon graduation, I went for Apple. But part of that story, I think, was, believe it or not, I think basically for the MBA program, normally they welcome the companies to come to the campus for recruiting.
Right.
Uh, and one of my story at the time was when Apple came to the campus, like normally the school will make announcement and say, hey, the next week, X company will come, or what company will present
Right.
to recruit, and then they will pre-screen the resumes.
Right.
Uh, I wasn't the first selected, believe or not. Yeah, I wasn't, selected for their first round of interview. But I felt like, okay, I really like the Apple. I like what they are doing, even though at the time that was 1999.
Right.
Apple was still sort of the underdog. I would just
Yeah.
say that wasn't really as famous
Yeah,
as today.
they weren't what they are today for sure. Yeah.
No, not at all. People were really concerned about, whether or not, Apple would survive.
Right.
And
Yeah, they were having some
like,
tough times back then.
oh yeah, absolutely. That was when like Steve just came back. I think
Mhm.
just a few current executives joined Apple, and but I was in supply chain and finance, so I thought like, okay, why not? I love technologies, because
Right.
other companies like consulting were, chemistry, yeah, chemistry, or airline, or automobile, obviously in Michigan.
Right.
I think they're all great, but I was curious about Silicon Valley, so I thought
Yeah.
like, okay, I would, come to the company presentation, even though I wasn't pre-selected.
Right.
So at the end of the presentation, I went to talk to the recruiter, and basically, told them about my background. Even though I don't really have any business experience, as you can imagine, I only taught Chinese for a year.
Right.
Um, but I, for whatever reason, I impressed them. They said, "Oh, you can come and join us for an interview the next day."
Awesome.
So that's I kind of created an opportunity for myself. So that's kind of a life learning experience. Like, sometimes don't take a no as a no, just go try your best, and
Right.
you never know what's going to happen, right?
So just so we're clear, you weren't in the first round of interviews.
Mhm.
So you went down there and met somebody.
Mhm.
So what made you do that?
As I said, I was very curious about the company. I was very curious about Silicon Valley. I look at, all other companies. I think Apple was on top of my sort of priority list. I
Right.
really want to get into, a company in Silicon Valley and really learn about, the culture here. I feel that could be once in a lifetime experience.
Right.
Even though at the time, actually, I interned with Nortel Networks. So that's another life story, I guess. I interned the summer before. I interned with Nortel Networks. I was waiting for their offer, full-time job offer. So I thought like I would just join Nortel. But
Right.
when Apple came, I thought like, wow, Silicon Valley, that sounds very cool and fun. I wanted to kind of experience it. So I went to the company presentation. I sort of, share my perspectives, and I don't even remember actually what I said, but somehow I impressed, one of the recruiters, and agreed to add me to their list for the next day's interview.
So did you go and introduce yourself to the recruiter, or did you stand up and ask questions?
I think I might have asked questions, but probably what I really remember was I did go down the aisle because that was like a big classroom, as you can imagine. So I went to the recruiter, with my resume. I said, this is me. What I did, this, and that. And I asked them some questions, I believe. So somehow, even though without any business background or even meaningful work experience, I impressed them, and they added me to the interview list.
So you didn't make the first round, but you went down and introduced yourself to a recruiter and struck up a conversation with them, and you were able to get their attention enough to where you got. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.